I want you to picture a scenario. And I know for a fact this is going to feel universally relatable, perhaps even a little bit too real for comfort if you are in the thick of your academic journey right now.
Oh, absolutely. It's that classic rite of passage.
Yeah, exactly. So you are sitting completely alone in your room. The only light is the harsh blue glow of your laptop screen. You are staring at a blank document. And right there, in the top left corner, the cursor is blinking.
Just mocking you.
It really is. It's blinking with this rhythmic, relentless pulse. It doesn't just feel like a cursor. It feels like a tiny digital metronome counting down the very limited time you have left to figure out your entire future.
And let me guess, there's a stack of reading material somewhere nearby.
Oh, a massive one. To your left, there is a towering, intimidating stack of unread PDF journals. You've downloaded them, you've meticulously organized them into folders with names like Thesis Sources, Final V3, but you haven't dared to actually read them yet.
Because reading them makes it real.
Right. And to your right, there is a cup of coffee that went cold at least 2 hours ago. You are likely a university student, and you are currently staring down the single biggest, most complex challenge of your entire academic life, the university thesis. Or, as the source material for today affectionately and sometimes terrifyingly refers to it, the scriptsy.
The dreaded scriptsy.
You might be feeling the immense weight of this ultimate dilemma. Do you take the path of spreading hundreds of questionnaires, trying to convince strangers to fill them out, and then wrestling with cold, hard, complex statistical software? Or do you take the other path, where you sit for endless hours interviewing people one by one until your throat is completely dry, only to stay up all night transcribing audio recordings word for word?
It feels like an impossible choice when you're just starting out.
It really does. So if you are feeling that exact crushing weight of confusion right now, take a deep breath. You are absolutely not alone. Almost every single person who has ever walked across a graduation stage has been stuck in that exact chair, staring at that exact blinking cursor. Welcome to today's deep dive.
I'm really excited for this one.
Me too.
Yeah.
Because our mission today is highly specific, incredibly urgent, and designed to get you out of that chair with a profound sense of purpose. We are going to completely unpack the hidden philosophical secrets behind research paradigms.
And that is a mission I think we can all get behind. Because the goal here isn't just to give you a quick tip or a superficial shortcut to graduate. The goal is to stop you from doing the single most dangerous thing a young researcher can do.
Which is?
Blindly following what your friends are doing just because it seems like the path of least resistance.
Oh, wow, yeah.
That herd mentality in academia where everyone just does a survey because everyone else is doing a survey is a massive trap. We are here to help you build an irrefutable, rock-solid, theoretically sound foundation for your research.
So you actually know why you're doing what you're doing.
Exactly. We want you to build a foundation so strong that when you finally sit in that interrogation chair during your thesis defense, facing a panel of professors, your methodology isn't just a random choice.
Yeah.
It is absolutely bulletproof because you actually understand the philosophy beneath it.
And to build that kind of bulletproof foundation, we aren't just pulling together random blog posts or generic internet articles. We are diving into something much more substantial.
The holy grail, you might say.
Literally the holy grail of research methodology in Indonesia. It is a legendary book by Professor Dr. Sugiono, which comprehensively covers quantitative, qualitative, and research and development, or R&D methods.
It's a thick one.
It is massive. Now, let's be honest. There is a very high probability that you, or at least your roommate, possess this exact book right now. It's probably sitting on a shelf, functioning as a very expensive, very thick paperweight.
I've definitely seen it used to prop up a monitor or two.
Right. But merely owning the book isn't going to save your thesis. We need to extract its actual essence. We have to understand the philosophical engine driving these methods. But before we get into the heavy philosophy, I think we need to define our terms. What are we actually doing when we claim to be doing research?
That is the perfect starting point. If we trace research back to its absolute root, stripping away all the dense academic jargon, what is it? Fundamentally, it is a scientific way to solve a problem.
Okay, a scientific way to solve a problem.
But it is a very specific, disciplined way. It must be systematic, it must be measurable, and it must be intensely logical. You are setting out to solve a problem in reality using a defined set of rules that other people can follow and verify.
So it's not just guessing.
No,
What?
absolutely not.
Yeah.
And the text provides an incredibly sharp, brilliant analogy for this. It asks us to think about a simple medical thermometer.
Like the one you'd keep in your medicine cabinet.
Exactly. A thermometer is a highly valid, scientifically recognized, globally accepted tool. It has been tested rigorously. It is perfect for its intended purpose, which is measuring temperature. But imagine you are trying to find out your body weight, and you stubbornly insist on standing on that medical thermometer.
Well, it's going to break, first of all.
Right, and more importantly, it doesn't matter how accurate the thermometer is at measuring heat. Choosing the wrong methodology at chapter 1 of your thesis is exactly like stepping on a thermometer to weigh yourself.
The tool is valid, but it is completely fundamentally irrelevant to the specific problem you're trying to solve.
Precisely.
Okay, hold on. I want to make sure I completely understand that distinction because it seems crucial for anyone listening. You're saying a tool can be perfectly scientific and valid, but still be the completely wrong choice for my specific problem.
Yes.
So if I spend 6 months designing the most mathematically perfect survey in the world, but my research question is actually about deep emotional trauma, I'm basically standing on the thermometer.
You're standing on the thermometer. You could have flawless statistics, perfectly calculated standard deviations, and beautifully rendered graphs. Your math could be unassailable.
But it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all, because if the problem required an understanding of nuanced human emotion, something a 1 to 5 rating scale simply cannot capture, your flawless math is completely useless. You have failed to measure what you actually set out to measure. This is the difference between doing something right and doing the right thing.
Wow. Doing something right versus doing the right thing. That is powerful. So to prevent you, the listener, from spending months stepping on a thermometer, we need to divide the vast, intimidating world of methodology into its major continents.
They're often presented as opposing poles, almost like rival factions in academia.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the first massive continent, the one that deals in hard numbers, absolute certainties, and strict rules, the world of quantitative research.
Right. And before we even touch a questionnaire, and long before we even whisper the word statistics, we have to look underneath the quantitative methodology at the philosophical bedrock it stands on. You cannot truly understand quantitative research without understanding the philosophy of positivism.
Positivism? That sounds intense. Where does that even come from?
To understand positivism, we have to look at a bit of history. Positivism wasn't born from studying human poetry or culture or messy human relationships.
I would guess not.
It was born from the hard natural sciences during the 19th century. We're talking about physics. We're talking about chemistry.
So guys in labs with beakers.
Exactly. Think of figures like Auguste Comte, who wanted to bring the absolute rigor and undeniable certainty of the natural sciences into the study of society. The early positivists essentially had what you might call physics envy.
It is envy.
Yeah. They look at how physicists could mathematically prove the laws of thermodynamics, or how astronomers could perfectly predict an eclipse decades in advance, and they asked, why can't we do that with human beings?
Wait, you're saying these early researchers literally thought human beings in a society were as predictable as planets orbiting the sun? That seems incredibly rigid. Humans are chaotic.
It does seem rigid to us now, but in the positivist worldview, the social world, the chaotic world of human behavior, operates with the exact same undeniable certainty as the law of gravity.
Really?
Yes. Gravity doesn't care about your mood. Gravity doesn't care about your cultural background. It just pulls. Positivism fundamentally believes human phenomena have similar underlying universal laws. Therefore, reality is viewed as singular.
Singular, meaning there is only one truth.
Exactly. It is objective. It exists out there, entirely independent of the researcher, just waiting to be discovered. If you and I look at the same phenomenon using the same precise tools, we should get the exact same answer.
Right.
And because these laws apply universally, this reality is highly, highly measurable.
So if I put on my positivist glasses, I don't see a swirling, unpredictable mess of human emotions. I see social phenomena as concrete, tangible things that can be isolated from their messy environment, chopped up and turned into numbers.
That is the goal, yes.
You break complex human life down into what we call variables so you can hunt for strict cause and effect relationships. The text offers an analogy here that I find fascinating, the broken car analogy.
It's a great one.
Imagine you are staring at a car that has completely broken down on the side of the road. If you are looking at the scenario strictly through a quantitative positivist lens, you do not care about the driver.
Not at all.
You do not care if they are having a terrible day, you do not care if they are late for a life-changing job interview, and you certainly do not care about the bumpy, pothole-filled history of the road the car just traveled. All of that context is irrelevant noise.
Or what do?
You simply pop the hood, You detach the engine, pull it entirely out of the car, carry it into a sterile, controlled laboratory, and you test the fuel injection system completely isolated from the body, the wheels, and the emotional driver.
That analogy perfectly captures the essence of the method. You isolate the variable. It is a traditional, highly linear approach. It moves straight from point A to point B, and crucially, it relies heavily on deductive logic.
I hear that term deductive logic thrown around a lot in methodology classes. Can we break that down? What does it actually mean in practice for a student writing a thesis?
Certainly, deductive logic means you move from the general to the specific. You do not go out into the real world empty-handed to just see what you find.
Because that would be chaotic.
It would be a mess. Instead, you start in the library. You start in your own head. You look at grand, established theories that already exist. From those massive theories, you construct a very specific, highly targeted guess about what you think will happen in your specific scenario.
And we call that guess a hypothesis.
Exactly. For example, the grand theory might be that financial stress reduces workplace productivity. Your specific deductive guess, your hypothesis might be, if I survey 100 accountants during tax season, those with higher self-reported personal debt will make more data entry errors.
Okay, that is incredibly specific.
Yes, you start with the theory, create the guess, and then, and only then, do you go out into the field to collect data. You're going to the field for one pure, singular reason.
To prove if you were right.
Exactly. To prove whether the grand theory you hold in your head actually matches the hard numbers you collect on the ground.
But if I pull the engine out of the car, I know how the engine works because it's metal. If I pull a human out of their environment to test a specific variable, don't they act completely differently? I mean, if I know I'm being tested in a sterile environment, I'm not going to act naturally. How does quantitative research deal with the fact that its subject knows it's being watched?
That is exactly why the methodology imposes such incredibly strict rules on the researcher. When you are collecting data in a quantitative study, you must metaphorically put on a crisp white lab coat.
A lab coat, meaning you have to be clinical.
Yes, clinical. You must maintain a strict, objective, almost cold distance from your research subjects. If you get too close, if you show too much empathy, if you laugh at their jokes or nod sympathetically at their struggles, you risk influencing their answers.
You contaminate the data.
You contaminate the data. Your primary directive as a quantitative researcher is to be completely and utterly neutral.
And because you have to be so neutral, the actual tool you use to gather the data can't really be you, right? It has to be an inanimate object.
Precisely. The instrument is not the researcher. The instrument is the standardized test, is the Likert scale.
Just to make sure we are all on the same page, a Likert scale is what you see on almost every customer service survey ever created. It's the classic, on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is strongly disagree and 5 is strongly agree, how satisfied are you with this product?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You use that inanimate instrument or a multiple choice Google form, and you blast it out to 500 email addresses. It's fascinating because the distance between the researcher and the subject is so extreme.
You don't even need to know what the respondent's face looks like. You don't need to know their name, the struggles they faced that morning, or the tone of their voice. It is entirely transactional. Once you have those hundreds of completed forms, you take that raw data and you feed it into statistical software.
You might hear people talk about SPSS.
Right, which stands for Statistical Package for the Social Sciences. Think of SPSS as Microsoft Excel, but specifically engineered on steroids to run wildly complex mathematical models, regressions, and correlations that a human brain could never process manually. As long as the respondent checked the box and that number successfully hits your SPSS spreadsheet, the data is considered scientifically valid.
It is the gold standard for that specific paradigm.
But I have to be honest, as a skeptic here, does a 4 out of 5 really capture a human being's true feelings?
It's a fair question.
If you ask me if I'm happy at work and I click 4, maybe I clicked it because I love my boss, but I actually hate the work itself. Or maybe I clicked 4 because I'm terrified HR is monitoring my IP address. The number 4 seems so incredibly reductionist. How can you possibly strip away a human's context and still get valid data?
It is reductionist by design.
Yeah.
And you are highlighting the exact limitation of the quantitative method. However, you have to remember what the goal is. That logic of isolation and reduction is incredibly powerful when your goal is high generalization.
High generalization. Okay.
You want to prove that a specific medical intervention lowers blood pressure across a population of 10 million people. You cannot sit down and have a deep emotional conversation with 10 million individuals about how they feel about their heart.
No, you'd never finish.
You need them to step on a scale and get a number. Quantitative research sacrifices deep, nuanced context in exchange for the power of massive scale and universal application.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about scale versus depth. But, as your defense of it implies, and as we all inherently know, the human world is rarely as simple, predictable, or mechanistic as a car engine or a blood pressure reader.
Absolutely not.
Human beings are messy, our motivations are hidden, and that realization seamlessly forces us to look at the exact opposite pole of methodology. If quantitative isolation makes sense for a car engine, what happens when the engine is a human being who acts completely differently depending on who is watching?
That question initiates the profound shift into the world of qualitative research. If quantitative is a straight line, qualitative does a complete jarring 180-degree turn. It abandons the philosophy of positivism and stands firmly on the philosophical bedrock of post-positivism.
Post-positivism, meaning literally after positivism, it's a reaction against the idea that humans are just predictable machines.
Exactly. The shift in worldview here is radical. In post-positivism, the fundamental belief is that reality is never singular. It is never just one objective truth waiting out there to be measured by a perfectly calibrated thermometer.
So what is it?
Reality is multiple. It is holistic, it is incredibly dynamic, and it is constructed from endlessly overlapping layers of subjective meaning. In this worldview, you cannot isolate a human variable in a sterile lab. If you remove a human from their culture, their daily context, their economic stress, or their complex web of social interactions, you fundamentally destroy the very thing you are trying to study.
To illustrate this massive shift from the quantifiable surface to the deeply meaningful, the text gives us a story that I think perfectly crystallizes the difference. It is the fishing on a Tuesday analogy.
I love this one.
Let's paint the picture for you. Imagine a man sitting very quietly by the side of a river. He has a fishing pole in his hand. It is a Tuesday morning. This is during normal peak working hours when most people are at the office.
Okay.
Now, if we look at this man through our old quantitative positivist lens, our conclusion is going to be incredibly efficient and brutally literal. He is catching fish.
That is the observable fact.
Right. That is the measurable reality. You sit there with your clipboard, you start your stopwatch, you count exactly how many hours he sits by the river, and you count precisely how many fish end up in his bucket. Done. Data collected. The relationship between time spent and fish caught is established.
But the moment you swap those lenses and put on your qualitative post-positivist glasses, counting the fish becomes completely inadequate.
Yes, it misses the point.
Completely. In fact, the fish might be entirely irrelevant. What's fascinating here is that the qualitative lens compels you to dig into the invisible, silent meanings behind his actions. You look at him sitting there on a Tuesday and you start asking the real questions. Why is he actually there?
Right. Is he experiencing severe, crushing burnout at his corporate office, and this riverbank is the only place he can sit in silence and breathe?
Exactly. Is he intensely lonely, and he comes to the river just hoping to find another fisherman to have a basic human conversation with?
Or, to be entirely practical and slightly less romantic, is he just hiding out to escape a volatile argument with his spouse at home?
Yes. The quantitative lens sees the physical action. The qualitative lens demands to understand the layered, hidden psychological and cultural reality driving that action.
So, if quantitative uses deductive logic, starting with a grand theory and testing it, how does qualitative work? Does it use the reverse?
Precisely. Qualitative research relies heavily on inductive logic. You do not start with a rigid theory or a predetermined guess.
You don't take a hypothesis into the field.
No. You go into the field with an open mind, you gather massive amounts of raw, messy data observations, conversations, cultural artifacts, and from that raw data, you build a brand new theory from ground up. You move from the specific observed reality to the general theory. You are discovering the theory, not just testing it.
I want to use a quick analogy to see if I have this inside versus outside perspective right. Is quantitative essentially like trying to review a complex, narrative-driven video game by simply looking at its source code and counting how many lines of code there are, while qualitative is actually picking up the controller, immersing yourself in the lore, and experience of how the game makes you feel?
That is a surprisingly sharp way to put it. Counting the lines of code will give you an objective, undeniable fact about the game's file size. but it will tell you absolutely nothing about why millions of people cried when a specific character died. Qualitative research requires you to pick up the controller.
So when do we use which? If you are sitting at your desk right now staring at your blank laptop screen, how do you know if you need to count the fish or ask about the fisherman's emotional state?
The text uses a brilliant spatial metaphor to help researchers decide. Quantitative research is your weapon of choice when your problem is crystal clear.
Meaning you know what you're looking for.
Exactly. You are standing in a well-lit room, you know exactly what you are fighting, you know the exact variables you want to measure, and you just need to measure the impact or the correlation. For example, does an increase in salary lead to a decrease in employee turnover? The variables are clear salary and turnover. You just need the numbers.
But what if the room isn't well lit?
Qualitative research is built for when the problem is dim, or even pitch black.
Okay.
Imagine you are blindfolded and dropped out of a helicopter into the middle of a dense, uncharted jungle. You have no map, you have no compass, but you were told there is an ancient gold mine somewhere in the trees.
You can't just start walking in a straight line.
No, you cannot just start digging a straight trench.
Mhm.
If you bring a survey into that jungle, you don't even know what questions to put on the survey. You have to survive first. You have to slowly blend in with the local environment. You have to carefully feel out the dangerous terrain, and you have to let the raw, chaotic data of the jungle slowly reveal the actual shape of the problem you are trying to solve. You are exploring the unknown.
And because you are dropped into the jungle without a map, you obviously can't bring your standardized Google form with you. This highlights the most radical and sometimes terrifying difference in qualitative research. There is no piece of paper to hide behind. You, the researcher sitting there listening to this, you are the instrument.
The human instrument.
Yes. Your eyes observing the scene, your ears listening to the subtle shifts in tone of voice, your mind processing the historical context, and your human empathy connecting with the subject, those are the only tools you have to gather data. The text explicitly refers to this as the human instrument. And honestly, bringing this up gives us the perfect opportunity to shatter one of the most persistent, widespread myths on university campuses everywhere.
Ah, yes. The great enduring campus myth. I hear it every single semester.
You hear it in the library, you hear it in the cafes. A student will say, look, I'm terrible at math. SPSS software terrifies me. I'm just going to do a qualitative thesis because it's just chatting with people. I'm a social person. I like talking. It's way easier. It's essentially just hanging out and writing a diary entry.
It makes my blood boil a little bit.
That mindset paints the student not necessarily as lazy, but as deeply misunderstanding what qualitative data actually is.
It is a tragically dangerous misconception. The text brings in a quote from the renowned methodologist Borg and Gall to forcefully debunk this exact attitude. They state unequivocally that qualitative research is much more difficult to do well than quantitative research.
Much more difficult.
Yes, it is not the easy way out. It is not a refuge for those who fear numbers. In fact, if done with true academic rigor, it is significantly harder.
I'm going to push back on that for the sake of the listener. Why is it so much harder? If there is no advanced calculus, if I don't have to learn how to run a multivariate regression analysis, why is having a conversation harder than doing complex math?
Because the data you are dealing with is inherently subjective, fluid, entirely unstructured, and incredibly messy. When your instrument is a piece of paper, the paper does the heavy lifting. The survey asks the question, the respondent picks a box, and the software calculates the variance. When you are the instrument, your human mind has to do all of that processing in real time, during a live conversation. You require a massive encyclopedic foundation of theoretical and social knowledge.
What happens if you don't have that theoretical foundation? What if you just go in and chat?
If your worldview is narrow, or if you haven't read deeply into the sociological or psychological theories surrounding your topic, you will eventually find yourself sitting across the table from a subject who holds the exact key to your research problem. They will hint at it in passing, they will use a specific metaphor, or their tone will drop.
And you'll just miss it.
Completely. Because you lack the theoretical framework to recognize the significance of what they just said, you will just stare at them blankly. You won't know the crucial probing follow-up question to ask. You will smile, nod, and move on to your next pre-written question, and you will miss the gold mine entirely. A qualitative interview is an intricate, high-stakes intellectual dance. It is absolutely not just reading a census list to someone.
And the intellectual dance is only half the battle. There is an immense psychological and emotional burden placed entirely on the human instrument. If you were doing qualitative research, you have to actively build what we call rapport. You have to forge a deep, genuine emotional connection and establish absolute trust with a stranger.
Which is incredibly hard to do.
Let's be real. You can't just confidently stride into an isolated indigenous village or march into the mahogany-lined office of a Fortune 500 CEO, whip out a notebook, and expect them to suddenly spill their deepest, darkest institutional secrets to a 20-something university student. They will instantly put up walls. They will give you PR answers. You have to earn the right to hear the unfiltered truth.
Earning that right requires mastering a highly specific psychological perspective. You have to navigate the delicate tension between the emic and the emic perspectives. This is the hallmark of a skilled human instrument.
Emic and etic. Okay, break those down.
The emic perspective means looking at the world strictly through the subject's own cultural lens and their own internal logic. It is the ultimate insider's view. It doesn't mean you lose your own identity, but it means you empathize so deeply that you understand why their world makes perfect sense to them, even if it contradicts your own beliefs. The emic perspective is the opposite. It is looking at them from the outside, judging their actions by your own Western, academic, or institutional standards.
To make sure we grasp this because it's so vital, let's use a tangible example. How does the tension between emic and emic play out in a real field scenario?
Let's say you are conducting anthropological research in a remote agricultural village. The community leaders inform you that they are preparing for a specific, elaborate, week-long ritual because they firmly believe it actively repels the heavy rains that could destroy their upcoming harvest.
Okay, if I take the eidetic approach, the judgmental, outsider, purely scientific approach, I might look at them and say, that's scientifically impossible. Rain is dictated by atmospheric pressure, humidity, and global weather patterns. Your dancing does not affect the clouds.
If I say that, I'm guessing I've just destroyed any chance of them talking to me ever again.
Precisely. You would have effectively destroyed all trust, alienated your subjects, and failed as a qualitative researcher. But if you are a skilled researcher utilizing the emic perspective, you actively suspend your meteorological knowledge.
You just let it go.
You don't try to correct them. Instead, you study the profound communal meaning of what repelling the rain means to them. You investigate how the ritual builds social cohesion, how it allows the community to collectively process their shared anxiety about a fragile crop, and how it reinforces their spiritual and social hierarchy. You accept their reality as a valid framework in order to understand their behavior. Doing this successfully without subtle judgment or arrogance leaking into your tone requires massive mental flexibility and exhausting emotional stamina. So if I'm dropped in this pitch-black jungle, relying solely on my empathy and my ability to navigate these complex cultural realities without a rigid script, what do I actually do? How do you go into the field without the entire process just devolving into total unstructured chaos, where you just end up with 500 pages of random observations? Let's say I walk into a highly complex cultural situation I don't understand at all. Where do I start?
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text provides another incredible visual analogy to explain how qualitative researchers impose order on that chaos. It is the analogy of a foreign tourist at an all-night shadow puppet show, a traditional weighing kulit performance in Asia. This perfectly illustrates the controlled, three-phase flow of qualitative fieldwork.
I want to put myself in the shoes of that tourist. I've never been to Asia. I have no cultural context for what weighing kulit is. Suddenly, I walk into a massive open-air pavilion, and I am immediately overwhelmed. My senses are absolutely bombarded. There is the incredibly loud, chaotic, metallic clanging of the traditional gamelan orchestra. There are hundreds of people sitting around, some watching, some sleeping, chatting loudly, eating boiled peanuts. The air is thick with the heavy scent of burning incense and clove cigarettes, and up front, the puppeteer, the dalang, is chanting rapidly in an ancient language I don't speak a word of. If I am the researcher, and this is my field, I am paralyzed by how much data is hitting me at once.
And that paralysis is totally normal. What you are experiencing is that overwhelmed tourist is phase one. We call this orientation or description. In qualitative research, when you first enter the field, whether it's a village, a hospital ward, or a corporate boardroom, you are that tourist. You have to take absolutely everything in. You do not filter yet. You let the chaos wash over you.
So you're not narrowing down yet?
Not yet. During this phase, you ask broad, sweeping, grand tour questions. You might literally find a local and ask, can you just tell me generally what is happening here tonight? You're simply trying to get your bearings and understand the boundaries of the environment.
But I can't just wander around asking general questions forever, right? If I try to research absolutely everything I see, if I try to document the history of the peanut vendors, the metallurgy of the bronze gamelan instruments, the chemical composition of the incense, and the religious history of the puppet, I will be in the field for 10 years. I will drown in data and fail out of my university program.
Exactly. That is the trap of qualitative research. To survive, you must brutally transition to phase two.
Reduction.
Brutal reduction. You must make agonizing decisions to throw away the noise. You have to actively decide to ignore the fascinating gamelan music, even if you love it. You purposefully ignore the crowd dynamics and the peanut vendors. You aggressively narrow your entire radar to focus on only one specific element. Let's say the specific physical interaction between the red-faced puppet and the hands of the puppeteer. Everything else ceases to exist for your research. You are reducing the chaos to a manageable focal point.
And once I have thrown away all that noise and narrowed my focus, what happens next?
You enter phase three, the deep dive. Now that you're exclusively looking at the red-faced puppet, the nature of your questions completely transforms. You aren't asking about the general vibe of the pavilion anymore. You are asking hyper-specific, targeted questions. What specific type of buffalo leather was used to carve this exact puppet? What is the precise origin of the gold leaf paint used on its crown? What is the ancient moral philosophy intentionally carved into the shape of its eye?
So the process is take it all in, throw 90% of it away, and obsess over the remaining 10%. This brings up a concept I find incredibly liberating but also terrifying: emergent design. My proposal that I wrote back in my dorm room, it's practically useless once I get to the puppet show, isn't it?
The profound lesson here is that in qualitative research, the meticulously formatted proposal you wrote for your professors is nothing more than a rough, temporary map. It is a preliminary sketch. It is entirely legal, acceptable, and actually highly encouraged by top methodologists to let the raw, messy reality of the field slap away your initial assumptions.
I love that. Slap away the assumptions.
Yes, if you go in looking for A, but the field screams that B is the real issue, you change your research. You must have the humility to let the field dictate the theory you use, rather than stubbornly forcing your preconceived theory onto the field just because you already wrote it down.
Okay, I have to stop you there and play devil's advocate because I can hear the positivist professors in the back of the room grinding their teeth. This is the exact moment they will pounce.
Bring it on.
A positivist will look at this and say, hold on. In quantitative research, I have powerful SPSS software running complex, verified algorithms to mathematically prove my data is valid. In qualitative research, you just admitted that the design changes on the fly. You admit that the researcher, the human instrument, is inherently flawed, subjective, and biased. If it's all just your subjective interpretation of what you saw at a puppet show, how does academia know you didn't just sit in a coffee shop, invent a bunch of quotes, and write a brilliant fictional story? Where is the scientific validity? How do we know any of this is real?
That is the lethal question. It is the ultimate positivist attack on qualitative methodology.
Yeah.
And the defense is fascinating because qualitative researchers do not run away from this critique.
We don't.
No, we openly admit that the human instrument is naturally flawed, biased, and deeply subjective. Because we acknowledge this, we do not try to test the researcher in a sterile lab to prove they are objective. Instead, we rigorously, relentlessly cross-examine the data they produce. We put the data on trial.
And the ultimate technique for this cross-examination, the way we put the data on trial, is called triangulation. Can we dive deep into this? I know the word comes from navigation and geometry, using multiple points to find an exact location, but how does it apply to human data?
Triangulation is the art of combining completely different data collection methods or cross-checking completely different sources of information to ensure that the phenomenon you were reporting on isn't just an illusion, a misunderstanding, or a flat-out lie from your subject. It is the built-in lie detector of qualitative research.
I want to share a highly relatable narrative that perfectly illustrates why triangulation is non-negotiable. Let's say you were doing a study on employee job satisfaction at a flashy, high-growth, heavily funded tech startup. You start by acting a bit like a quantitative researcher. You send out a beautifully designed survey to the entire staff. The results come back, and they are absolutely glowing. The average score for I love working here is a 9 out of 10. Now, if you are a surface level researcher, you pack up your laptop, write your conclusion, and declare to the world, this startup is a modern worker's paradise. Innovation thrives here. But because you are a sharp, skeptical, qualitative investigator, you physically visit the office and you sense that something invisible is fundamentally off. The tension in the air is thick, nobody is smiling. The vibe completely contradicts the math.
That contradiction is your alarm bell. So you use triangulation. You change your method entirely. You stop sending digital surveys. Instead, you physically go hang out in the employee smoking area out back, or you sit quietly in the corner of the local coffee shop where the employees take their lunch rush. You blend in, build some rapport, and you listen. And what you hear off the record shatters your previous data.
You find out they are exhausted, they are severely burned out, they are being micromanaged to death by a deeply toxic leadership team, and half of the engineering department is secretly sending out their CVs under the table during lunch. You realize they completely lied on your perfectly formatted survey because they were absolutely terrified that HR or the IT department would track their IP address, figure out who gave a low score, and fire them. The survey measured fear, not satisfaction.
That clash between the perfect, clean survey data and the grim, messy reality of the smoking area is the absolute crucible of qualitative research. And here's the most critical rule you must remember. When you face that massive contradiction, you never just average the two conflicting data sets. You don't say, well, the survey said satisfaction was a 9, the smoking area said it was a 2, so the scientific truth must be a 5.5.
Right, because averaging a lie and the truth just gives you a mathematically precise piece of fiction. It's an egregious manipulation of reality.
Exactly. Instead, that massive clash is your starting point. You instantly transition from a passive observer into an active investigator. You track down and interview employees who have already resigned and have nothing left to lose by telling the truth. You quietly ask to check internal HR transfer documents to see what the actual verifiable turnover rate is over the last 6 months. You dig, you cross-reference, and you interrogate the environment from 3, 4, 5 different angles until the absolute truth is saturated. You keep digging until your findings are utterly bulletproof against any thesis committee's questioning.
It's pure detective work. It's thrilling, honestly. Now, we have extensively explored the straight, deductive line of quantitative measurement, and we have navigated the deep, inductive jungle of qualitative meaning. But I want to point out a truly tragic misunderstanding that plagues so many university campuses, and it causes a lot of unnecessary anxiety. So many students in the social sciences, in humanities, in education, or business firmly believe they only have two choices in life. You either spread a questionnaire and do math, or you conduct an interview and write a narrative. But Professor Sugiono's book forcefully presents a third path. A path that many students completely ignore, to their own detriment, research and development, or R&D.
And we must immediately shatter the enduring, deeply entrenched myth surrounding R&D. There is a pervasive false assumption in academia that the R&D methodology is exclusively reserved for the engineering departments or the hard sciences.
Right, people think it's just for building engines.
People think it is only for the civil engineering kids, pouring experimental earthquake-proof concrete, or the mechanical engineering students wiring up new electric motors in a workshop, or pharmaceutical companies developing new drugs. That is completely false, and it severely limits what social science students think they are capable of achieving. So if R&D isn't just about building physical engines or pouring concrete, what exactly is it doing? How does it fit into the world of education or sociology? If we connect this to the bigger picture, to understand R&D's true value, you have to look at the historical division of knowledge. R&D occupies a highly unique, highly strategic position. You can think of it as a massive golden bridge connecting two entirely different islands of academia that rarely talk to each other.
What are the two islands?
On one side, you have basic research. This is the realm of producing pure, abstract theory. A basic researcher might spend 10 years studying the cognitive development of toddlers. They generally do not care if their findings are practically useful to a kindergarten teacher tomorrow. Their sole purpose is expanding the boundaries of human knowledge and publishing in high-level journals. It is the classic ivory tower. On the other side of the water, you have applied research, which is entirely focused on solving immediate, daily, practical issues in the field, often without deep concern for generating new overarching theories.
And R&D is the bridge between the ivory tower and the boots on the ground.
Exactly. R&D takes the abstract, pure theories generated by basic research like that theory on toddler cognition, and aggressively engineers them into tangible, usable products, systems, or methodologies that real people can actually use to solve real problems in their daily lives. It turns theory into a tool.
But building that bridge is not a quick overnight process. You don't just have an idea and build it. R&D requires a rigorous longitudinal cycle. It is a marathon, not a sprint. I want to break down how this actually works step by step because it's incredibly structured. Let's look at the cycle.
The standard model for R&D in education and social sciences often adapts frameworks like the Borgen-Gull 10-step model, but we can distill it into a highly practical cycle.
Let's do that. Step 1. You actually have to start by acting like a pure researcher. You don't start by building anything. You use the quantitative or qualitative methods we just discussed, surveys, interviews, observations, to deeply investigate the field and find an absolute, desperate, screaming need from a specific group of users. You have to prove the problem exists before you try to solve it.
Step 2. Once you comprehensively understand the problem and the user's needs, you retreat to the drawing board. You dive into the literature and use established academic theory to design a hypothetical product or system that should, in theory, solve the problem. You are creating a blueprint based on science.
Step 3. You develop a prototype of that product, and you take it out into the field to test it with a small group of real users. And here is the harsh reality, the absolute guarantee of R&D: it will fail. Your first prototype will have massive flaws. The users will be confused, the system will break, or it just won't work as intended.
And that failure is not a disaster. It is the vital data R&D relies on. Because in step 4, you pull the prototype back into the lab, you rigorously analyze the user feedback, you revise the design, you fix the flaws, and you take it back out to the field to test it again on a larger group. You repeat this brutal, exhausting cycle of testing, failing, and revising, what we call iterative development, until the product is proven to be highly effective and virtually flawless.
I want to give some inspiring, real-world examples of how this applies to social science students because I think it changes the way people view their thesis. Let's look at education. If you are an education major and your initial needs analysis shows that elementary kids in a specific district are literally falling asleep in class because traditional, text-heavy books are fundamentally incompatible with how their highly digital brains process information, you don't just write a 100-page paper complaining about the state of modern education. You use R&D to build and rigorously test an augmented reality learning module based on cognitive load theory. You create a new system of teaching, test it in the classroom, refine it until test scores improve, and you deliver a solution.
Or consider a student in IT or public administration. You go back to your rural hometown and observe that your grandmother's local medical clinic is still relying on giant, chaotic stacks of paper records. These records are literally being eaten by termites, causing massive delays, lost patient histories, and critical errors in medication. You don't just document the inefficiency for your professors. You use the R&D methodology to build, test, and refine a localized offline-to-online patient management app specifically designed for older healthcare workers with low tech literacy. You iterate the interface until it entirely eliminates the waiting lines and secures the data.
The emotional payoff of choosing the R&D path is unmatched. I want you to imagine graduation day. When you finally stand there, you aren't just holding a dusty theoretical stack of paper that will be shoved into the dark archives of the campus library, never to be read again. You are holding a living, breathing product. You can look your future employers or the world in the eye and say, this isn't just an observation or an opinion about a problem. This is a tangible, real-world solution that I created, tested, and proved.
That is the ultimate power of the third path. It moves academia from a state of passive observation to a state of active, powerful intervention.
We have covered so much ground today. We have journeyed through the strict deductive numbers of positivism. We have navigated the deep inductive shadows of post-positivism and the human instrument. And we have built the tangible iterative products of R&D. So what does this all mean? When you're sitting at your desk agonizing over which method to choose, I hope you realize you are doing something much deeper than just fulfilling an annoying graduation requirement. Choosing a methodology is actually making a profound philosophical declaration about how you, as a developing intellectual, view the very nature of the universe.
It truly is a philosophical choice. When you look out your window at society, what do you see? Do you see a predictable clockwork machine where every action can be mathematically measured, isolated in a forecast? If so, you lean toward quantitative. Do you see a dense, chaotic, beautiful web of secret motives, hidden traumas, and unsaid cultural rules that require deep empathy to untangle? That is qualitative. Or do you see a broken system that is desperately crying out for a tangible, engineered, practical fix? That is R&D. Choosing your method is choosing the glasses through which you will view reality for the rest of your career.
And historically, choosing those glasses was seen as a blood oath. You weren't allowed to change them. This brings us to a massive classic orthodox debate in academia that raged for decades, famously championed by scholars like Thomas Kuhn, who wrote about the paradigm shifts in science, and Charles Reichert. They argued fiercely that quantitative and qualitative paradigms are completely fundamentally mutually exclusive. They are oil and water.
Yes, the paradigm wars of the late 20th century. In their strict orthodox view, it is philosophically forbidden to mix them. Their logic was rooted in pure philosophy. You simply cannot simultaneously hold the belief that reality is singular, objective, and independent of the observer, while also deeply believing that reality is multiple, subjective, and constructed by the observer. The cognitive dissonance is too great. They argued that a researcher must pick one paradigm, pledge their absolute intellectual allegiance to it, and make it their academic soulmate for life.
But I love that we don't end the story there, trapped in a philosophical Cold War. Because Professor Sugiono, building on the work of modern pragmatists, offers an incredibly elegant, pragmatic middle way to resolve this conflict. He acknowledges that, yes, in the realm of pure abstract philosophy, sitting in an armchair, they are oil and water at the exact same second. But out here in the messy, practical world of actual problem solving, they don't have to be mixed simultaneously. They can be used sequentially. They can be run like a beautifully coordinated relay race.
The sequential mixed methods approach is arguably the most powerful tool a modern, adaptable researcher can wield. Let's look at a contemporary, highly relevant example to see how this relay race actually works in practice. Suppose you want to investigate the exploding phenomenon of workplace burnout, specifically among Gen Z employees entering the corporate world. This is a relatively new, highly nuanced, and very dim issue.
Right. You cannot start with a massive quantitative survey because you don't even know the right questions to put on the survey yet. You don't know what is causing the burnout, so how can you measure it?
Precisely. So first, you put on your qualitative glasses. You go out and you just hang out with Gen Z workers. You conduct deep, empathetic, unstructured interviews. You listen to their anxieties without interrupting. And through that qualitative deep dive, you discover a hidden, highly specific emotional pattern. Perhaps you discover a unique anxiety related to constant digital surveillance on corporate messaging apps, a specific type of stress that previous generations never faced. You have just used the inductive power of qualitative methods to generate a brand new, groundbreaking hypothesis.
And then the baton is passed. You take off the qualitative glasses and you firmly put on the quantitative glasses. You take that brilliant new hypothesis you just discovered by talking to 10 people in the coffee shop, and you build a massive, highly structured, standardized survey around that specific anxiety of digital surveillance. You blast that survey out to 10,000 Gen Z workers across the entire nation. You use the brute force of quantitative statistics and SPSS to definitively prove whether your local qualitative discovery is actually a national objective truth.
Exactly. You used the jungle exploration of qualitative research to find where the gold was hidden, and then you brought in the heavy machinery of quantitative research to mine it at scale. You used the profound strengths of each paradigm to completely neutralize the inherent weaknesses of the other. It is the ultimate synthesis of deep discovery and broad verification.
As we wrap up this massive depth dive, I want to speak directly to you. Yes, you, the person still sitting there staring at that blinking cursor with the cold coffee and the intimidating stack of PDFs. I know the thesis feels like an insurmountable mountain of campus bureaucracy. It feels like an arbitrary test you just have to memorize, survive, get an A on, and escape so you can start your real life. But I promise you, it is so much more than that. This process is a profound test of your intellectual bravery and your clarity of direction. I want you to truly internalize this realization. There are absolutely no bad methodologies in science. There are no inferior paradigms. There are only researchers who accidentally or lazily pick the wrong tool for their otherwise noble mission. Do not let a fear of statistics or a fear of talking to strangers dictate your path in life.
My final advice to you is to actively, fiercely nurture your curiosity. Do not let the crushing pressure of the impending deadline extinguish the fire of why you decided to study your field in the first place. You chose your major for a reason. Keep that fire alive. When this deep dive ends, I want you to return to that blinking laptop screen, not with a sense of dread, but equipped with the precise philosophical paradigm you need to finally conquer the monster. You have the tools now. You understand the rules of the game.
And as you finally take that last sip of your very cold coffee and crack your knuckles over the keyboard, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to mull over. If it is fundamentally true that the human social reality out there possesses both macro, highly measurable, undeniable patterns of numbers, while simultaneously hiding microscopic, deeply emotional, complex layers of hidden meaning, are you actually imprisoning your own intellectual potential to understand the sheer, breathtaking complexity of the world if you choose to remain fanatically loyal to just one single method? Perhaps the true genius of the future researcher, the exact kind of innovative, problem solving leader you are meant to become, isn't found in stubbornly defending dogmatic, outdated academic borders. Perhaps true genius is found in mastering the flexible, acrobatic leaps between them. Thank you so much for exploring the depths of methodology with us today. We can't wait to have you join us on our next intellectual exploration.